Reddit, what is the worst wedding you've ever been to? What made it bad? My best friend's wedding. She should never have married her husband. She is only with him because she doesn't think she can do better and no one else had really expressed interest. It was painful to watch her just lock herself into this darkness, annihilation of self. I could see she even knew that's what was happening. Somewhere deep inside. So many things happened which made it clear what was happening and even why. To bullet the despair, she spent the evening before with my husband and I talking about any guy she had ever had an interest in or flirtation with. It was like she was mourning all of her lost chances. No excitement, no mention of her husband-to-be. We jokingly, but not that jokingly, offered to just take her home with us. 6 hours away, she had no plans for getting ready the next day. Asked me at 10 PM to do her hair and makeup and arrange for the photographer to come to my hotel to document this. We also drove her to the wedding. Neither I nor my husband, her second best friend, were invited to be in her wedding party. It was strange. And so many people the next day would say, "Oh, you're her best friend. She talks about you all the time," and look confused. Her matron of honor and bridesmaid were her husband's best man's family. They did not contribute to helping her get ready. It was like she didn't want us, the people who care about her, involved in this. Her parents had not been in touch for days and came 15 minutes late to the ceremony, never calling her beforehand. She had clearly learned her lack of value at home. His vows were mostly jokes for the audience. Loving her was never mentioned. Despite her asking him not to, he violently smushed the cake in her face. I helped her clean up. It was deeply up her nostrils, in her hair, in her eyes. Bridesmaids tried to take pictures while laughing until I menacingly threw them out of the bathroom. It took me a while to make her vauntly presentable again. I offered again to just take her with me, far less jokingly. This time she was quiet and a little teary but did not respond. Best man's speech was about her husband mostly, with a story about how clumsy she is. I had to walk outside. My husband had to calm me down as I cried and yelled about it all, before people heard me. In the end, this was a choice. She spent the following 10 years so far feeding the worst, saddest parts of herself. She's become completely self-involved. I guess she needs to because no one else in her life is taking care of her. We haven't actually spoken in about 3 years, though she emails with my husband, again, about herself only. She still calls me her BFF on Facebook and refers to my daughter as her niece, though my daughter doesn't know her at all. Thank God they never had children. I know they haven't had 6 in at least 4 years. It was a wedding, but it felt like watching someone commit suicide. This is odd, but I am going to say mine. This was because of my wife's family. We wanted to keep the wedding very small. We were very young and some thought we were too young to get married. So this was the reasoning for keeping it small. I had my parents, brother and 4 friends. My wife invited her parents, brother and grandmother. Her grandmother took it upon herself to invite the entire side of my wife's family. We had over 100 unexpected guests that acted as if they were insulted that they had to be there. The good news is, my wife kicks ass. Going on 15 years. Ugh. I had friends get married in a forest. It was a stretch of meager woods between 2 cornfields. Mosquitoes galore. We had to sit on logs that were covered in damp moss. The mud was ankle deep in places, and the ceremony was inaudible due to a tractor plowing the field. They served food out a charming old cottage that was actually a rotting former chicken coop that the groom literally dragged in from elsewhere. The entire event was a nightmare. The bride's aunt died on the dance floor while dancing. Edit. To add to the story, she fell down, and the DJ stopped the music until Ems arrived. They took her away, and when the music resumed, the DJ selected Bryan Adams' Heaven as the next song. I still remember the WTF dude look people were giving him. Went to a couple's wedding who were both on their second wedding. The dude was rich so everything was pretty nice, except they decided a DJ wasn't needed. She made a playlist from YouTube and had that playing. The levels on all the songs were different. We had to wait for AT Wi-Fi to play a load of the songs, and someone had to keep changing the playlist when it finished. But that wasn't the worst part. More than half the songs were Pitbull. He was on every playlist, sometimes in a row, and songs were repeated. I should add in that they definitely had the money for it, as they had a guy playing guitar the whole time. No singing, just acoustic guitar while pictures were being taken. My brother's wedding. My parents and I have helped him through a lot of trouble in his life, prison, addiction etc. He's clean and clear now, but I don't think he's ever understood what those years did to our family, and in typical white people fashion we never talk about it. His wife was wedding crazy, so it was all about her, which is fine, except her family had all the front tables. We were stuck down the back behind his Asirahab family. They had 3 hours of speeches where no one thanked or acknowledged my mum or dad, who had given them $20K for the wedding. We were then the last table to get to go to the buffet, by which time nothing was left. Oh, and of course there was no alcohol. My husband and I went through McDonald's on the way home. It just showed me that people never change. He's still an idiot. Now he's just an idiot with a wife. A sibling's wedding. It was a shotgun wedding, with the bride looking like a 7 months pregnant satin sausage. The groom drunk off his ass, despite not being legally old enough to drink. The ceremony being performed by the local Indian amongst the motorcycle gang the bride's dad belonged to, while the groom's mother and stepmother, who previously had restraining orders against one another, took a time out from their ongoing feud to share shots out of the same flask at a VFW hall off a major highway. Did I mention there were turkey vultures circling the building as we arrived? Eater, spelling. I was at a dry wedding where the main theme was books. You were assigned to read a book prior to the wedding and were sat with people who read that same book to create conversation. Interesting idea, but a majority of people aren't going to do it. People were also purposely not put with people they knew, in attempt to make people socialize with others. Basically all we did is make a few sentences about how we didn't read the book, and left after being served an inedible dinner and headed to a bar. You want to kill a wedding? Put speeches an hour after dinner and have that happen for 3 hours. I think speeches started around 8 PM. By the time the video tributes and the people talking about how great everyone is ended, it was 11 o'clock and everyone was just done. Not a lot of time to dance and socialize left over when the venue was closing at midnight. I was feeling sick, so I should have left sooner. My cousin's wedding. I was about 7 or 8 and vaguely remembered my grandmother grabbing my brother and I and leaving. I remember being mad cause I didn't get any cake, didn't get to dance, nothing. When I got married this year, and was worried that my wedding was going to be a shit show, I was finally given the details as to why Gram made us leave so early. My cousin was not in contact at the time with her birth father. He showed up to the reception anyways. Everyone more or less tolerated him for the time as no one wanted to be the one to ruin my cousin's wedding. At some point, he made a pass at my mom and said pretty nasty comments to a 14-year-old girl that was there. My mom let the comments he made to her go, but the father of the 14-year-old girl did not. He punched him in the face, and he got punched. He fell backwards onto another lady, whose husband in turn jumped on him. It turned into an 8-person brawl including my dad and one of my cousins. No idea how my dad or cousin got involved, but alcohol was a factor. So where was my cousin, the bride, when all this was going down? She was in a truck with her new husband doing a line of coke. 12 people, including my dad, one male cousin, my cousin the bride, and her new husband all got arrested at her wedding. Her and her husband were caught doing blow when the cops showed up for the fight. My grandma realized something was going to go down when she saw my cousin's dad and the first guy start fighting and got my brother and I out of there. I have a pretty trashy extended family. Edit for clarity. 8 people got arrested for fighting. 4 for drugs. Went to a couple of dry weddings when I was first in college, both of which were for Christian couples that were my age who wanted to get married so they could finally have sex. Both were okay, but awkward. One was held in a reception hall that had an inexplicable amount of Wizard of Oz paraphernalia behind glass cases. The tables were too close together. It was hard watching the maid of honor give the speech since she was the bride's unmarried older sister who had a child. She was trying not to cry the whole time. For the other dry Christian wedding, I snuck in booze and shared. But because the dinner line was hours long, I ran out of alcohol before the dancing, and the dancing was terrible. The worst choice of songs was topped off by playing Kryptonite as a dance song with lots of dorky white teenagers trying to dance to it. I still get an extra bump of cringe every time I hear that song. For those curious, Kryptonite couple is divorced. Wizard of Oz couple is together to my knowledge. It was my brother's wedding. There were a lot of trashy and classic things. But in retrospect, what really made it bad was that it foreshadowed a lot of bad. At his own wedding he stole his thunder by announcing they were pregnant after hiding it to that point, and did it minutes before the ceremony for everyone to hear. Bride looked pissed through the entire thing. I'm pretty sure she didn't approve. I don't just mean the ceremony, I mean the entire night. Announced during his speech that whole table of arseholes who RSVP'd and didn't bother to show up, and he pointed to a table no one would have noticed. They are wrong. I will be a great husband, the best husband, and the best father. They will see. So yeah. He walked out on her when the baby was something like 2 months old to be with another girl he knocked up who was something like 6 months pregnant. They ran out of bottled water at a reception in a non-air conditioned church in July. There weren't cups on the tables either, so we couldn't even fill them at a sink or drinking fountain. There was no alcohol, which is fine, but I don't really dance without being a few drinks deep. We left immediately after the cake cutting, drenched in sweat. Probably my cousin's wedding. It was nice. There was nothing wrong with the wedding itself, but a lot of people are very confused by their relationship. It doesn't seem like they are in love. They could be two strangers on the bus. That's how much chemistry they have. It just didn't seem like they were right for each other and just got married because they felt like it was the next step. I talked to my sister about it the other day, and turns out that a few months after they got married, my cousin asked our aunt, her mother, how she could get an annulment. But then a week later she found out she was pregnant. They're still together today. She's due this winter. Anyone knows she talked to her mom about it except me, my mom and my sister. I don't even think her husband knows. Hyper-religious wedding. The ceremony was super long and all about God first, the couple second, and how the wife should obey the husband, and about how they needed to have kids now. Thankfully there was alcohol, but we were the only table drinking it. The bar staff were bored out of their minds. My ex was seated at the same table as my then boyfriend, husband, and I. The best man's speech was about the tickle fights him, the groom, and the other religious guys would have. And when the groom, who was a friend of mine from high school, came over to our table to say hi, a guy from the table behind him kept stroking his ear. It honestly was really sad the amount of closeted gay guys there was in that room. Also, I made the mistake of mentioning to some religious chick that I lived with my boyfriend, and she suddenly turned away and stopped talking to me. Lol. Edit. Just wanted to add that also while we were waiting in the church before the ceremony, I found pamphlets on the walls talking about trips where they go and try to convert newly arrived Muslims to the country, to Christianity. Oh man, this one is easy. It was on a beach on a day where the wind decided it wanted to make a point that it was boss. Wind coming off the ocean tends to cut through clothing really easily, and this was an outside wedding at night. Ceremony starts. The microphone they are using is straight static and no one can hear a thing the groom say, and it's just loud ear-piercing static. Once they finish and they are about to walk down the aisle to take pictures, the groom's brother run up there and grabs the mic and says, "Wait everyone, I have something to say." Gives a 30-minute sermon about God's will. Neither of these people getting married are religious. They go and take pictures. It takes 2.5 hours. It starts to become nighttime and everyone is in dress clothes waiting for the pictures to finish up. Still no food and everyone is starving and freezing to death. Then finally it was food time. Apparently the catering company drove all the food pre-made from hours away. It consisted of white rice, salad, mashed potatoes, and the driest unsalted chicken you would get from El Pollo Loco. At least we would get cake. I was wrong. They brought out little cheesecake bites that were cut into little squares. I ate one and knew the gig was up. It was the telltale sign of Sara Lee cheesecake. These caterers seriously charged these people to cater their wedding and went and got $8 cheesecakes from the store and tried to pass it off. It was kind of crazy and I left. I was too cold to be out there during that. My brother's wasn't bad, but it was kind of annoying. It was held in a place where no microphones were allowed, due to the presence of tropical birds who would be upset by them. and the registrar who was doing the service had no concept of vocal projection. So we were just sitting there desperately trying to make out what she was saying so we could follow. I look grumpy in every photo due to straining myself to hear. And I was in the second row. We were essentially just watching a woman's lips flapping while my sister-in-law was wearing a nice dress. I've never been to a bad wedding, but I've been to weddings with bad moments. One of the worst was a Catholic wedding where the priest was cracking sexist jokes, covering horrible stereotypes. He talked for almost 30 minutes, and it was like a terrible stand-up show. He said things like, "As we all know, men and women are different. Women love shopping, and men love working with their hands. So men, when your wife goes shopping and buys you new stuff, just know that's what women are like. I mean, women. Am I right? Men. When you come home from work and the kids want to play, and your wife wants a break, remember she's been home with them all day and need a break too. Men and women's brains are different. While men's brains are organized and logical, women's brains are like a bowl of spaghetti. So when you're having communication problems, just remember you love spaghetti and it makes sense to her." My husband and I were trying really hard not to laugh. Other than that, it was a lovely and super fun wedding. We attended a wedding in Pakistan. I live in the UK, so it was a long flight to attend a wedding. However, once we attended the wedding, there were a lot of guests and family members attending. A lot of good food and singing dancing. I noticed a sign which read "No weapons allowed." Confused, I asked my dad why there was a sign that said "No weapons allowed." He said it's a tradition that people fired shots during singing and dancing. I was deeply scared that someone could be injured and or even died. So, 2 hours into the wedding, 2 shots went off. I was scared and screaming. I hid under the table. 5 minutes in, I noticed a lot of shouting and I came out of the hiding and it was people beating the guy who shot the gun. I had nightmares for a few days over this. One of my cousin's wedding. The couple were really happy and sweet. Everyone was having a good time and were a bit tipsy from all the alcohol. Out came our weird aunt and kept grinding against every visible male member present. Needless to say, watching your 40-something aunt rub her butt against another 40-something relative is not a pretty sight. That was forever immortalized in their wedding video. Been to many different weddings. High cost and low cost. Corny and plain. The worst though was a wedding that clearly was more of a wedding for wedding's sake. Instead of love, the couple got married, and the reception was in a hall that was set up right away for dance floor. There wasn't the typical meal, instead a buffet, which was fine. But the weird part was that the bride and groom sat at a regular table, just like everyone else. No head table, and the wedding party did not sit together. After we all had a bite of food, it was time for the first dance. This is where it got really uncomfortable. The groom had no intention of dancing, and it took 15 minutes of coaxing. After the DJ announced the first dance, before he'd get up, the dance was awkward and like a middle school dance all over again. Barely touching, no talking, and awkward eye contact. After the dance, he proceeded back to his table where he didn't get up, other than to get another beer. For the rest of the night, the bride was unfazed and hung around her friends in the back of the reception. The maid of honor changed into a very short dress and proceeded to dance with every old creepy guy who wanted to see what was under it, and she let them on the dance floor. I was very happy when we left, and it was just so uncomfortable the whole time we were there. They divorced a year later. Shock. It's a toss-up between the one where the bridal and groom part Y took a 1.5 hour detour between the ceremony and the reception for photos. A reception where no food was to be served prior to their arrival with only a cash bar that also wouldn't serve until their arrival. And a totally dry wedding where the groom put a large cash gift from one of the bride's family members under his plate only to forget until after the reception was cleaned up. Cue myself and several groomsmen inside a dumpster emptying and searching every bag in vain hopes of finding the lost money while the bride literally wept and wailed in the groom's arms. Fancy wedding at an award-winning restaurant. Groom was head chef. Maybe 100 or so guests. Stoked to eat some great food. We show up. Realize they had the wedding itself on a boat an hour earlier with only a dozen or so of the closest guests. Kinda weird walking in and seeing the bride in her dress just schmoozing with everyone, but cool. Whatever floats your boat. Lol. Open bar. Everyone grabs their drinks and starts to get a bit tipsy. Food starts coming out. Everyone is lined up buffet style. 4 of those hotel pans of food come out and are quickly emptied. The rest of the crowd, maybe 60-70 people, wait around in line for 10, 15, 20 minutes. Most sit back down or grab another drink. Another half hour passes. People get more drunk. Food still isn't coming out. Bride, groom, and family seem completely unfazed. There was a cheese meat board, but everything was gone in the first 10 minutes except for a giant wheel of parmesan, which people started hacking at desperately with forks. Flash forward 2 hours. Everyone is completely trashed and angry, confused AF. Still no food. We're in a restaurant. The groom is a chef. What is happening? A drunk 13-year-old girl stole my hat. We went to Taco Bell. 6 months later, the bride messages me on Facebook asking if my now husband and I would like them to cater our upcoming wedding. Lol. Went to my cousin's wedding in November in New York. That took place in a barn with no heating whatsoever. Everyone was freezing their asses off. The bride's dead father had recorded a message for her. She didn't know about it. They had to stop the wedding for an hour while she cried. The bridesmaids cried with her. 10/10 worst wedding I've ever been to. Also, the food was mediocre. Parents of the bride were divorced and it was clearly not amicable. The bride didn't seem to have much backbone, so instead of telling them to put aside their it, they ran amok. She walked down the aisle with her natural dad, but then her in-law dad stood with her at the altar. She had to do 2 separate father-daughter dances to 2 complete songs. The bio dad was hooked up with a loud trashy girl a good 15-20 years younger than her bio mom, so she decided to wear a low-cut dress that looked more for night clubbing while the ex-wife stared daggers at her all night. It was most awkward 4 hours of my life. At my cousin's wedding, his new wife made us all wait for over an hour after the wedding was set to start to even walk down the aisle, and another hour after the ceremony finished to let us walk the 5 feet from the ceremony hall to the reception hall. We were starving and the food took another hour after that to be served to us. With no open bar or many hors d'oeuvres, her family is super rich and comically snobby, and my side of the family doesn't really get along with them, so it was like the Montags versus Capulets. Mainly, just making us wait so ducking long to have the wedding occur on the bride's own time. It's just disrespectful for all the guests. The bride was thin. Sickly thin, as in unhealthy means of losing weight. Sugar was going on in dark corners. It was quite a trip to get to, but thankfully not far enough we had to stay over. This meant folks had to get home, which was about 1.5 plus hours away, and we started to all pour out around 10:30 or 11 PM. Drunk AF groom was not having it. He grabbed a mic and started to call everyone pussies for leaving. Lol. It was entertaining, but my heart sank for the mother of the bride. Another one was an overnight and it was midday. The ceremony was outside in the middle of a New Jersey July. I thought I was going to faint. My Sil, the bride's sister, legit thought she peed herself. BC sweat was pouring down her legs. No one danced inside at the reception, as blinding sunlight in the middle of a Sunday isn't really inspiring people to let loose. I have been to baby showers that were more fun and lively. My older sister's wedding. My parents originally weren't going to attend because she was marrying a Jew and they were conservative Christians who were against them being together, and very vocal about it. From day one, my dad cheated on my mom and was in the process of leaving her for his secretary, but they both decided to attend the ceremony and act like they were still together for my sister's sake. Awkward doesn't even begin to describe that scenario. The grooms came from a very wealthy family, so most of the people there were the hooty patooty types I can't stand to be around. My dad decided to make a spectacle of himself, so he got drunk and insulted some of the groom's family members. My older brother couldn't make it to the wedding because he and his wife were expecting their baby right around the same date. Trust me, if I could have gotten some girl knocked up to get out of going, I would have. A coastal wedding in England in January. The weather here is unpredictable at the best of times, and the bride and groom decided to have their wedding at a castle right by the sea. Of course, it being January, the weather was atrocious. High winds coming directly off the sea and pissing rain all day. It was freezing and the reception was in a marquee. There were very few heaters. I remember I specifically bought a new outfit for this wedding and was able to wear it again to the next one because I didn't take off my coat the entire time. It was hideous. Edit. The wedding was hideous, not my outfit. I'm going to say my cousin's daughter's wedding. It was in Labor Day weekend and it felt like the hottest day ever. First of all, I'm not a fan of people having weddings on a holiday weekend, but whatever. Not why this was bad. We drove an hour to get to this barn in the middle of bumduck nowhere. All the chairs were set up in this field in the beating sun. The service was about 45 minutes and I thought the groom was going to pass out. He was 300 pounds and had the suit jacket with the vest still on. We finally made it through the service and we got into the barn for the reception. No fans and no air conditioning. It was 100 people crammed into a barn in 98-degree weather. This was the barn's first wedding with everything brand new. My mother went to sit down in the chair split in half. Thank God my uncle didn't sit there like he wanted to because he had just gotten major back surgery and the ambulance would have had to come and find this barn in the middle of the woods. My mom, my dad, my uncle, and myself went to sit under the shade of an apple tree until dinner was served and then got the hell out of there. It would have been a beautiful wedding if it wasn't the same temperature as hell. Went to a wedding at a lake. It had stunningly beautiful scenery which looked great on the wedding photos. What you couldn't see on the wedding photos were the algae that had formed in the lake due to the warm summer and the resulting death stench from the algae killing all the wildlife in the lake.